You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the finale of Season 2 of Prodigy, and perhaps the finale of Prodigy altogether. We can maybe talk about that at the end. I'm Don Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
I just feel hungry for snake tail. I don't know what it is.
And Father Jason Tyler. Hey, Father.
Hello.
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on Twitter, X, where we're at SQPN, and leave us comments wherever you find us. We love to hear from you. There's another show on the StarQuest Network I want to make sure that you know about called Pray Station Portable. This is your opportunity to pray every day with the church in the Divine Office or Liturgy of the Hours. It's one of the oldest Catholic podcasts, one of the oldest podcasts, period. And you can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/ESP. So, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of Ouroboros?
Let's see. This week, the kids and the adults save the universe. The end.
Well, there you go. That's succinct.
I can also do it in a little more detail. But
sure, why not?
2 episodes, so it's a little complex. But here we go. This week, Essentia launches her war against Federation, but she creates a dangerous number of wormholes to do so, and they could tear space-time apart and track the loom to destroy the timeline. Nevertheless, on Voyager, Wesley celebrates because this is what they need to create the wormhole to go back in time to return the protostar to Tars Lamora. But they'll have to figure out the needed space-time coordinates, and these coordinates must be manually input from the top of the spire Essentia is using to create the wormholes, because of course they do. Wesley, Rock, Zero, and Magell eventually figure out that they don't need to know when the protostar arrived at Tars Lamora, because it was never Chakotay who sent it there. Instead, it was them. So they can control when it arrived, and this will be the correct time. They thus determine the coordinates that will be used. Down on Solemn, Gwyn, Dal, Jankum, Murph, and Iltheron seek to input the coordinates, and this leads to a complex battle with Essentia and her forces. And all the kids play crucial parts in it. At the climax, Essentia is about to kill Gwyn with her own heirloom, but Iltheron, the younger good version of Essentia, and numerous other Valnakat lend their wills to Gwyn, who reclaims kind of telepathically. So Gwyn reclaims control of the heirloom and defeats old bad Essentia. They manage to create the wormhole to Tars Lamora, only for the loom to suddenly attack en masse because of all the wormholes that bad Essentia created. In part 2, the loom are streaming out of the wormhole to the past, so they must fly the protostar through the swarm of oncoming loom. There's no way to do this with an autopilot because, of course, there isn't. So Chakotay and the kids pilot the ship back in time. Voyager follows to beam them out before they arrive. We then get an emotional montage of the first 2 seasons of the show as history resets itself and the timeline is repaired. Afterwards, the Federation makes peaceful contact with Solemn under the leadership of Iltheron, and everybody settles into their new post-crisis lives. But a new crisis emerges when the synths on Mars attack their human overlords and destroy the new fleet, as we saw in Season 1 of Star Trek Picard. Admiral Jellicoe says Starfleet must scale back its exploration and peaceful missions for now, but Janeway objects. And she arranges for the kids to continue these missions aboard the USS Prodigy, a protostar-class ship that was prepared before the new emergency. The kids are all given field commissions to the rank of Starfleet ensigns. A version of Holo Janeway with memories of the kids will serve as their emergency command hologram on the ship, which has been upgraded to a training vessel. Dal volunteers to be Gwyn's first officer on the new mission, and they set off to continue Starfleet's mission of exploration and peace. The end.
Father, what'd you think of this conclusion?
Really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great finale. A lot of things getting wrapped up here. I like the connections with Star Trek Picard and the short treks about Mars getting attacked. It did not feel as forced as, say, the Discovery finale connecting to the Calypso short trek really felt.
Yeah, that's true. Jimmy, how about you?
I thought it was good. I have some quibbles, particularly with the ending. But the main action in these, really the main action occurs in the first episode and a half, and the back half has a bit of Lord of the Rings syndrome of let's drag this in and out as long as possible. And it's not bad, but I have some quibbles with that, but, and some quibbles overall, but I enjoyed it. My first note is out of the gate dramatic feel. This feels really dramatic. This is the way a season or series finale needs to feel. And I actually liked it better than the finale of season 1 for reasons we can get into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the end, I want to talk about how we feel about the series as a whole and the season as a whole. But for the as a finale, I think I didn't feel rushed. Very often I feel like a season finale has a rushed action sequence so we can have plenty of time to, do the post action, denouement.
Well, we kind of
feel rushed.
Not with Essentia, but I think it did with the Loom, because they have this huge Loom threat as the cliffhanger for part 1. And then the Loom are streaming out of the wormhole, and Janeway just says, remodulate the shields and start shooting them, and they fly through them.
Yeah.
And go into the wormhole. So that they kind of blow past that threat.
Well, and they also kind of, there's a little bit of flaw as well with, when Voyager was confronted with that Rev 1 ship earlier, one of these massive ships that Essentia has built, she was losing. She was going to lose. Now it's presented with dozens of them and just flies among them and starts blasting them. And, now the collapsing of the wormholes is what defeats them, but Voyager is not having nearly the same trouble as it was before. It was a little too easy, I think, in that sense. And same way with the Loom.
I think that and this part of the space battle, I thought got a little visually confused, and I don't know that I followed it all. But what Essentia did was open a wormhole to every starbase and try to send one of the Rev ships through it. And so, I got the impression that a lot of the Rev ships were taking an inordinately long time to traverse the wormholes they were going through, and they were sticking half in and half out. And so Janeway was just kind of dealing with the back half of these ships as they were going through wormholes. Right.
Yeah. I mean, they could have rerouted one of them to deal with Voyager or whatever, but you know what I mean? It's just, it seemed, they wanted to get past, don't look too closely at it, I think was the idea.
Yeah. But by the way, early on in my notes, I set a number of goals for things that I thought we needed to see in this two-parter. The first one, because they've got Bribble, the modified Tribble, on Rock's shoulder, and she's been there for several episodes ever since they picked her up. I assume it's a she. I don't know. But my first note is Bribble needs something to do. She needs to make some contribution, because otherwise she's just a pet that they picked up partway through the season, and they're not paying that off. Why are you introducing someone's pet to do nothing with it except have it be on someone's shoulder? And then I said, so after saying Bribble needs something to do, I said, so does young Essentia. Because they've set her up and she's part of the rebellion, so she needs something to do. And then I also have a note on Nova Squadron. I'd mentioned that was a possible chair he could be talking about, but at this point we're too late in the series for them to develop that. Right. So of those three things, it was something else which we'll get to, but they didn't give Bribble anything to do. So Bribble is just superfluous, doesn't play any part in the larger story, in which case, why did you devote a whole episode to just picking up a pet? And young Essentia doesn't get anything unique to do. She does telepathically offer her will to Gwen, but she's in a crowd of a whole bunch of other Valnikat doing the same thing. Right. So they didn't really pay off young Essentia either. They needed some kind of more substantial contribution from her. Like maybe Gwen is in a death struggle with old Essentia, and young Essentia comes to her defense and does battle with her older self or something. That would be the way to pay off that character.
Right.
Or have her initiate the transfer of will rather than Iltheron or something along those lines.
Yeah. Or have it be just her will. So it's like she's fighting her older self to neutralize her will, and that lets Gwen take control of the artifact again.
Right. Right. Any of those things would not have substantially altered the length of the story or the trajectory of the story, but would have given her a better path in this story. So yeah, you're right. I agree with that. And we really didn't, as you said, get any resolution with Nova Squadron had nothing to do in this episode. There was we didn't even see them at all. So yeah.
I also have a note on this two-parter where I say, we've got for the season, we have a female main villain who is not the Borg Queen. And I liked that because normally if you have a season villain, it's usually a man and stuff like that. And I thought it was a nice variation to have the main villain be a female who's not the Borg Queen, because we've seen the Borg Queen a bunch.
Yeah. Now, we did have, I guess, back in, was it Discovery Season 3, you had the Orion villain, was kind of the main villain for the season, is that right? Or am I...
I'm sorry, you're referring to...
something that Jimmy does not acknowledge the existence of.
Gotcha, yeah.
I did see...
I Discovery.
Yeah, I did see that season, though, but yeah. But I thought that was a pretty forgettable villain.
It was, definitely.
At least, what was interesting in this one is Essentia ostensibly has been, her villainy has been about saving Solemn from the Federation. She sees the problems the Federation causes by first contact, and all of this has been about saving Solemn until now that the people have revolted against her autocratic rule. Now it's just revenge. She doesn't care about Solemn anymore. She just wants... Even if, in fact, acknowledges, if we open up all these wormholes right here, we're going to potentially destroy Solemn. She doesn't care. She just wants her revenge on the Federation. Yeah,
they do. That moment for her kind of passes, though. And they do give her a bit of redemption, because after she falls from power and the looms start pouring through all the wormholes, she said, and she's being led away to jail, she says, "What have I done?" And so they do give her, repentance in the end, which is nice.
Yeah. She's not just a villain. And that's, again, I think, Father, as you said before, even the villains are not one-dimensional in this. They are the products of their choices and have their ability to change and repent.
And, seeing her kind of lose sight of her goal, as it were, when, again, originally she's wanting to save Solemn from this bad first contact or whatever. But she makes so many evil choices along the way, chooses the evil things so many times, that does make her lose sight of her original goal. And vengeance becomes this all-consuming thing that prevents her from seeing what she was originally setting out to do, and prevents her from really following through where she needed to.
It's that classic observation about human nature is, vengeance is all consuming. If vengeance becomes your motivation, then it will consume you. And we've seen that very often in literature and in reality.
But if you're going to consume vengeance, it is a dish best served cold.
It is. So we do get much of the first part of this first episode is exposition of the plan. That's a classic storytelling trope. So one team preps a protostar, another calculates the wormhole stuff, another's going to the surface to co-opt Essentia's machine. Voyager will fight a delaying action, and this preps us for all the ways that this is going to go wrong. This is the ideal plan, and now when you see it unfold, you will see where everything is going to go. Not everything literally, but lots of things are going to go wrong. And that's a fine storytelling tactic. I don't have a problem with that.
That's in fact, that's a trope in caper plots where if they tell you the plan then ahead of time, then you're going to get to watch the plan go wrong. And how do they fix it? On the other hand, if they don't tell you the plan ahead of time, like on Mission Impossible, they just tell you the goal. They don't tell you how we're going to pull this off. Then you get to watch the plan go right.
That's right. Couple interesting things. Hollow Janeway gets an arc here where she expresses, the fact is the protostar has to go back to Tars Lamora and be reset to exactly the way it was when the kids found it, which means that Hollow Janeway has to be reset, and expresses this fear of losing everything she's become and all that she's come to know. And it's kind of funny that finally in Star Trek, we acknowledge that we can download programs and make backup copies.
I liked it from that perspective because it does acknowledge the truth if you can just make a copy. But it's also not technically true that they needed her to lose her memories on the ship, because they've already established, like with Data on Next Gen, Mr. Data, I order you never to refer to the events of this after I have my memory wiped and do it, so they've established that the technology they have could pretend to the human characters that they're only just meeting for the first time when really they're not.
Right. And to tell her, make sure all the events unfold exactly as they did before. And being a computer, she could do that. Yeah.
And in fact, having the memories of how everything happened could be an asset in making sure it happens this way.
Right. So one of the things, you mentioned in the recap how the Wesley and Rock and Zero are trying to calculate the correct wormhole that they need to travel through. And Rock realizes that the real wormhole is the one we've been going through all along. Like the real wormhole has been there all along. And in fact, what we have here is a causal loop, right? Is it that the right term? Where all of this has happened before and is now to create the situation we're in. I think that's the way to put it.
And I like the fact they decide, we can just choose when we send it back and it'll be the correct date, because it was always us. It was never Chakotay. So I like that. I do have a bit, and this is a minor criticism, but I have a minor criticism of the scene, because we have this big conference with Wesley, Majel, Zero, and Rock trying to figure out how to send the ship back. And I'm going, and they're, this is a temporal mechanics conversation. I'm going, you've got a traveler and 3 kids. Shouldn't there be some Voyager scientists, at least in the background, working on this problem with you? I do like, though, after they figured out that what they're going to do, Zero says, yip, yip, hoot, hoot. And then to top that, Majel says, hoot, hoot, indeed. Coming from a Vulcan, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's a very Tuvok or Spock moment there. I like that. Majel, it's interesting to see different actors try to do Vulcans and with varying success. Tuvok was a great Vulcan. Spock, of course, the canonical Vulcan. So nice. I think Majel has come along very well as a Vulcan character as well.
And I like it shows she's going with the flow.
Yeah, she's become part of the team. I did like also Murph got something to do. Murph has really come along as a character, and Murph versus Dreadnought was quite the epic conflict there. It was interesting to see that, even to the point where when they're on this construct on the surface, there's a part of it where if you fall into it, you'll be erased from existence. And at one point, Murph and Dreadnought fall apparently into this. And then I thought, are they going to do that to Murph? But no, which thankfully, they emerge from this, or Murph emerges from it along with Dreadnought's head, which was all that remained.
And they show us Dreadnought's head coming up over the edge of the ledge first. So you think Dreadnought has survived, and then it's just Murph holding Dreadnought's head. So they fake us out.
That was nice.
I have a note on this part of the story where I say I like the physicality of this final battle compared to last season, because last season was about fighting a virus. And this is not about fighting a virus. This is about physically battling your way to get to where you need to go to input these coordinates.
Yeah.
And so you have, like I mentioned a few weeks ago, the graphic novel Golden Age, where instead of having the Golden Age heroes have a one-punch win, it's like a death of 1,000 cuts. And this has much more of that feel of everyone is making a contribution, but there's no single punch that solves this part of the problem. It's a contribution by many different people doing many different things.
Yeah.
In some ways, this reminded me of Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One, where they had to fight their way to the tower to import the data in order to, save the day. And it's kind of what we have here. And it's, with a very different resolution, thankfully. But it really had that sense of, like this idea, you have to, battle your way to the top to win, that idea of every step of the way. It is a very kinetic, a very action oriented way of telling that story. And I am glad that we get that.
And it's played better than some similar stories. I mean, Anakin, I have the high ground. Clearly, I've won in a world of force jumps.
Yes. I have the high ground. We'll never let them live that down. So Asensi does give the cliche classic villain plaintive cry, "Why won't you die?" Which is every hero hears from the villain right before the end. So I thought that was a nice little fun moment. I don't criticize it. I just thought it was kind of, you have to put it in. And then we get that moment with we always knew that Asensi was going to, not Asensia, that Gwyn was always going to get back the heirloom from Asensia. It just was a matter of time. She lost it early on in the season, but it was hers. And that getting it back is symbolic of her reclaiming, her place and taking away from Asensia this idea that you're in charge of, that you are in charge of Solum, that you are the leader of the Volnakat. And in fact, that was that nice moment where all of the Volnakat lend their will to her, because the control of the heirloom is will based. I think that's very interesting about the Volnakat as a species. This idea that there's some sort of mental power that they use. You was just symbolized by the lines on their head lighting up as they use it, and in Gwyn's place, when you supercharged, your eyes light up too. So I think that's a very kind of cool design, and then the air, it controls the heirloom as well. I thought it was very interesting to see that and to have that visualization of the people being behind Gwyn, literally.
Yeah, I would have played this a bit differently. I would have let her get the heirloom back, but I kind of think the more people that are involved, I mean, I understand it shows that you've got this whole crowd of people who support Gwyn rather than Asensia. And that's justified in the story, since Asensia has been a dictator, and a lot of people don't like dictators, and they've been even willing to rebel against her. So it makes sense that they'd be willing to do it, but I think that it cheapens the victory the more people are involved. Because if you need this whole mob to take down Asensia's willpower, that means Gwyn's will is pretty weak compared to Asensia's. And the purest form would be Asensia and Gwyn battled with their wills for control of the heirloom, and Gwyn wins, just by herself. That's the purest form. The next purest form is young Asensia comes in to neutralize old Asensia and let Gwyn have control again. But having a whole crowd take it down, it takes too long, for one thing, to me. It slows the action down as they're all group by group granting her their wills. Yeah. And I think it would have been more impactful if it had either been Gwyn alone or Gwyn and young Asensia doing it.
My guess is they were going for this idea that it's,
it's togetherness.
Yeah, well, the will of the many versus the will of the one. Maybe another way to put it too. I mean, it's not as hokey as Discovery's. We succeed in our togetherness because togetherness is all, and we are all one forever. So I get what you're saying. I think maybe the young Essentia versus older Essentia battle would have been slightly more satisfying. I think that would have been a nice counterpoint. And, taking a sort of redemption by her removing herself from power in a reverse of the timeline way of doing it. But yeah, I think I can see your point.
I would say that, and because this scene illustrates it, I like the design that they've done, the design work they've done with the Valnakat. They do not all look the same. They have Valnakat guards look different than Valnakat elders who look different than Valnakat citizens. They've got a bunch of different types of clothing and headdresses and all kinds of things. And that's not, you don't always see that.
Right.
Like if you look back at original series Klingons, they're all dressed exactly identical.
Yeah.
Or the Romulans in the Next Generation all went to the same barber.
Yeah, and had the same shoulder pads. Yeah,
that's right. Yes. Man, don't walk down the corridor side by side with Romulans because you're going to get bumped. It was the 80s, so you're right. I do really like that they put so much effort into designing the Valnakat. That they are one of the great new Star Trek species. So as the episode was. So Dal, we have that classic moment where Dal has to nearly sacrifice himself to fix that one thing that broke at the last second.
Because of course we do. That's
because of course
that's paint by numbers writing.
Yeah, he has to nearly die, and he becomes the conduit and all that sort of stuff. But
finally, though, the wormhole does form, and there we have a very interesting moment because everybody's looking up at it. Jankum looks up at it, sees the wormhole, and says, "Ain't she a sight?" Yeah. And Dal is using a pair of binoculars and looking down at Gwen and says, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's nice. We clearly have, romantic chemistry between these characters. They've been playing with that. It's never going to really go anywhere very far in this series because this is a kid's show, but it's nice to recognize that Dal is attracted to Gwen.
I like the fact that it's there and that's it. They don't spend a lot of time on it. They don't spend, there's not a lot of soap opera romanticism, relationships back and forth. I mean, it's one of the things that always got me why I stopped watching a lot of, like, say, the DC TV shows, the Arrow and Supergirl and all that sort of stuff. It's because it just became a soap opera. Who's interested in who, and all the interesting superhero action took a back seat to it. I think that's a danger of that sort of thing. I'm glad it's there. I like it. It's a nice character thing. I'm glad it's not a focus of the show. So that is true. So they have opened the wormhole, and then we end the first episode with the loom coming through. And what are we going to do now that this whole bunch of loom?
So we've basically wrapped up the Essentia threat in episode part 1 of this 2-parter.
Yep.
Now we need to deal with the loom, which they do by flying past them.
Right. Like you said before, it's a little unsatisfying. They fly through it. Voyager will accompany the protostar going through. Chakotay's in command with with our original crew of kids plus Majel. No one faces the end alone. Everyone, so we have this togetherness. And like you said, there's not a whole lot of suspense in this. They get through it, and that's that.
Yeah, I did like, as they're about to leave the protostar for the last time, Dal takes his comm badge off and puts it on the floor, which is a deep cut all the way back to episode 1 of season 1.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like they really planned this out, which of course they did because they wrote both seasons at the same time.
Does that make a time paradox, by the way, the comm badge?
It's a bootstrap paradox.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not, because I assume Dal gets a new comm badge.
Well, he he specifically picks it up in the episode one in this episode before heading over to the Protostar. We see him specifically pick it up and replace the one he's wearing with this comm badge.
In that case, it is meant to be a bootstrap paradox.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting.
And then I thought the montage we get, which I thought initially is just going to be of season 1, it ends up being of both seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was, we get music, and I thought it was emotionally effective. I liked it.
Yeah, I agree. It was nice to see some of those moments again. To be reminded of them.
I'm not normally a fan of montages, especially like flashback type montages, but I thought this one was well done. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't a clip show.
That's right.
Exactly.
Unlike season 2 finale of Next Gen.
So,
I don't know if y'all have ever seen Community. It's a sitcom based on a community college, a study group at a community college. Mm-hmm. And it plays with TV tropes. So like there's a bottle episode where the characters talk about the fact they're in a bottle episode, they're all like stuck in the library and none of them are allowed to leave the library for the whole episode. But there's also a clip show episode, except for the clip show, every time they go to a clip, it's something we've never seen before. They made up entirely new clips for the clip show.
Yep.
Cool.
On the Secrets of Stargate, they recently talked about the Citizen Joe episode where it's not exactly a clip show, but then at the end there's actually a clip of a previous of the past that is completely new material shot for that episode. So they had to put all the characters in like in season 2 makeup and hair and all that sort of stuff, which was funny. So yeah,
that's like the Community episode, except the whole episode is nothing but that. They're doing. Remember that time when we did this, and then they show it, and we've never seen it before.
Dal says something on board on the bridge where like, so we stayed together, and that's we've finally accomplished it. And Wesley says, "Oh, the reason that you have to stay together hasn't come yet. Things yet to come, wondrous and terrible things." He does in his sort of Doctor Who-ish way, which is interesting and sort of, hey, if we get a season 3, we get to see those wondrous and terrible things, perhaps. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So what he's referring to there is, it's basically spoiler, sweetie. This is, you'll find out. And we do find out later when they're given the mission with the USS Prodigy,
right?
They need to be together for that mission, which is basically season 3. And they talk about, this is why Wesley wanted us to stay together. It's for this, but it doesn't really make any sense because it's not just that moment they needed to be together. If that moment in the future was all they needed to be together for, then it wouldn't have mattered that they split up on Solemn to save Wesley and Iltheron.
Right. Maybe it's just Wesley being Wesley again.
Rule 1, the doctor lies.
Yeah, right. So we get this speech by Admiral Janeway at the end. And in the speech, she says, we do not feel the passage of time, but the presence of time within us. We grow from what we leave behind as we reach for what lies ahead. And that specific line was actually from a deleted scene in Star Trek Nemesis, Picard speaking to Data. And the writers, Prodigy, felt it was a scene, or at least lines, worth making canon. And so included it here. Because Janeway says, an old friend once said, so she's presumably quoting Picard here in this scene. So I thought that was a nice homage to a mediocre movie, but it was a good moment. I don't know about the sentiment, but I'm glad that they're making these connections.
So in this kind of post-climax part of the part of the show, which is basically the back half of episode 2. We get a whole bunch of, we see people settling into their new post-crisis lives. The Doctor completes his holonovel, which he gives a sensible title to, called The Mentor. Chakotay takes command of Voyager. Janeway retires to a farm in Indiana with a huge post-scarcity house on it. The kids start taking Temporal Mechanics 201 with the scientist who's a real person. Majel and Zero are getting their romance on, and they're doing the Vulcan finger touch thing that we saw Amanda and Sarek doing all the way back in Journey to Babel to indicate they were a couple. And the most important one is Wesley calls his mom on a compad and then sneaks up behind her. And she has a surprise for him and takes him into the next room and introduces him to Jack, who we don't see, but who in a little child's voice says, "Hi, what's your name?" Right.
So some like toddler or very young at the time. Yeah. That was a nice conclusion to, as we talked about before in our last episode on Touch of Grey, this Beverly showing up earlier in the season, Janeway telling Wesley last episode or last story, whatever, go call your mom, and then having that moment with her and Jack that we didn't get in Picard season 3. I'm glad they did that. It's really nice to see that they're still a family. Wesley's still part of Beverly and Jack's life in that way. Yeah.
And then the twist comes. The synths attack Mars and the new fleet is destroyed. And Jellicoe is like, we're going to have to cut back on stuff. And Janeway is called out of retirement, and she's okay getting called out of retirement, but boy, does she object to Jellicoe being perfectly sensible once again.
We could maybe dial it back a little.
Yeah.
No.
And so that's the justification. She pulls strings to get the Prodigy commissioned for the kids, and it really doesn't make sense to have just kids on board, even if you got an emergency command hologram.
But they've done it before. They've done Star Trek, so it's not just the Prodigy doing it. They've done this silliness before.
Well, they had kids on board, but not by themselves. Even the Nova Squadron episode, or the Red Squad episode of DS9, there were adult crew on that ship a minimal number, who then died.
Right.
Yeah. Can't spare a single officer for them they just use a hologram.
Yeah. But, I'm fine with them giving the kids a mission. I just think there should be, on the Prodigy, I just think there should be at least one adult live-in supervisor. And I think that Janeway objecting so hard is kind of ginned up drama. Because Jellicoe doesn't need, what he's saying is perfectly true. If your new fleet's just been destroyed, you're going to have to make do. You're still trying to evacuate as many Romulans as you can. You're not going to have time for peace and exploration stuff.
Right.
A little bit around the margin. So we can justify this one ship for your kids, and no doubt a few others doing stuff. But I don't think we need the total head button that we get with Janeway and Jellicoe when the solution is perfectly obvious.
We just have to maintain the fan animosity toward Jellicoe. That's really what it is. The poor guy.
Yeah. Another thing I thought was strange is they said all classes at Starfleet Academy had been canceled.
Yeah, that's nuts.
That is nuts, because it's like, all right, you're going to cancel all your classes, so what are you going to do about having new officers 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now?
Exactly. That's like we're having a vocations crisis, so shut down all the seminaries and yank the priests and put them in parishes.
In the 24th century, can they train them aboard ship? Or you can maybe take the senior class or the seniors and juniors.
Or have hologram teachers teach them.
Yeah, or learn on the job.
Yeah.
Maybe. But I wouldn't take the first years and the second years, maybe. That was a bit silly. By the way, the short track that deals with the First Contact Day is called Children of Mars. Just as a reminder, I was trying to remember that. So again, we're making these connections to the other Paramount Plus series. So,
and then we come to the I think what may be my final criticism of this ending, which is they've installed 2 seats in the central position, one for the captain, one for the first officer on the Prodigy. Mm-hmm. And I don't mind that. I mean, they had 3 central seats on Next Gen.
Sure.
Yeah.
But Dal, who's been taking a back seat for several episodes after having an established character trait of I want to pursue being a captain, volunteers to take the first officer slot under Gwen.
Yep.
And now really there should be an adult who's the captain.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you're for training purposes letting Gwen be acting captain, I just think this is out of character. I think that Dal has grown as a character to where he can work in a hierarchical structure and doesn't have to always put himself forward. But I just think it's a step too far. Gwen is what this feels like is a feminist promotion.
Right.
You know, because Gwen has not had an urge to be captain in the future, in the past. This feels like she's just being promoted because she's a girl. And Dal's taking a back seat because he's a boy. But this does not fit the characters that have been established.
Right.
If you wanted something like, it also feels like Michael Burnham doing the same thing with Saru in one season of Discovery. It's like Michael has been ambitious towards the captain's chair. Her taking a back seat here is kind of out of character, and then she ends up with it anyway. And this just feels like some of the same mistakes Voyager made with characters.
If this is a training vessel, then the kids who are in the command track would take turns.
Yeah.
Being, acting captain.
In fact, if it's a training ship, you're going to have a lot of cross training between different positions.
Right. So, yeah.
Like on a cannon crew, every member of the cannon crew needs to know all of the parts.
That's right.
Yep.
I wonder if we ever got a season 3, if we would see this as a continuation of this question of, captain versus not captain. I think we'd be revisiting this a little bit.
I'd hope so
to see that. Yeah. So as we record this, there is no season 3 coming. We barely got season 2, even though it was produced.
The creators have said that they'd love to do a season 3 and check in with these characters, as they grow up.
Yes. And the actors have all, signaled their willingness to be involved, including Kate Mulgrew. They've all said that they would love to do this, and they appreciate. There's a huge fan movement to get a season 3. But let's look at what we have, and kind of give an assessment of Prodigy as a whole, or by the seasons, and where things stand, and what we think maybe we could have done more of, or that we were satisfied with. Any particular thoughts on how Prodigy went as a whole?
Father, you first.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, the first few episodes of season 1, it took me a little while to get into because of, really connecting with the new characters took some time. But by the second half of the first season, I was much more enthusiastic. And then I thought the second season was very good. The time travel situation worked a little bit differently than what we've seen in some time travel things of Star Trek, but not so differently as to make it distracting, I guess. And we did bring in some old characters, but also did a good job of working with our new characters, or that is the ones that were specific to the Prodigy series. And I was very happy with the series as a whole.
How about you, Jimmy?
I enjoyed it. I think it and Lower Decks are my 2 favorite of the Paramount era series, with Strange New Worlds being a third. So I really enjoyed the show. I don't mind the fact it's for kids. I obviously have some critiques and things I think they could do better, but I enjoyed it a lot. I expected when it was announced that it would run for 2 seasons. That's a typical plan for a children's show these days. If it has a kind of story arc to it, you typically plan, like Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated did the same thing. It was a 2-season story. And that's fairly standard these days for kids shows, so I kind of expected that. But I like that it's been successful enough and is open-ended in a way that they could do a 3rd series, and I hope they do.
So, like you, Father, I felt like it was the first part of the first season was a little hard to get into, partly because it was so not Star Trek.
Right.
We weren't in Federation space. They weren't Federation species that we were familiar with in general. It was hard to get into. But once we got going, and especially once they got back to the Federation this season, and this was clearly Starfleet and that sort of thing, it really took off for me.
I like season 2 better than season 1.
Definitely. I wrote a post this weekend on my Substack where I titled "The Best Star Trek Show That Not Enough People Are Watching," and I really think that Prodigy should be more popular than it is, and I think part of the problem is the way they marketed it as a kids show.
Right.
I don't think it. I think it lowered expectations of it's a kid show. It's not for me, but it has enough in there that that you can enjoy it as an adult. The plots are sophisticated enough. It's not dumbed down or silly. I think it really works on that level, and I think they harmed themselves by marketing that way.
In fact, there was even behind the scenes discussions here at Secrets of Star Trek before it came out. I remember you and Father Corey were skeptical about whether we should even cover Prodigy, and to some extent skeptical about Lower Decks before it came out. And I said, even though they're not doing great with Discovery, they could do these well. And so in the end, I think we concluded it's valuable that we cover Prodigy.
Yeah, definitely. Lower Decks turned out to be, it's definitely not for kids. This sounds inappropriate for kids in that. But it turned out so animation, as we've seen over the recent years too, animation can be a great medium for adults to enjoy. It doesn't make it automatically for kids. And I see what Disney has done with Star Wars, their new Skeleton Crew series that's coming, features a cast of a lot of kids, but they're pushing the fact that it's not a kids show, and in fact have kind of positioned it a lot like Stranger Things, another Netflix show, which is definitely not a kids show, but it features kids as the characters. And I think they could have done that here. I also think it suffers from a little bit of the Star Trek in general is suffering from the streaming problem, which is in the old days of TV, a show was popular when it got plenty of viewers. More viewers meant more eyeballs for the ads, and advertisers would pay more. Now, more viewers doesn't necessarily mean more revenue, if it's not bringing in new subscribers to the service. And I think that's one of the things that's affecting the whole industry. It's a whole nother discussion, I think. But I think it has been affecting Star Trek a lot on Paramount Plus, because we're down to basically, after Lower Decks season 5 is done, we're down to one series on. Actually, no, we've got 2. That's a mistake. I need to edit my article. But we've got Strange New Worlds and the upcoming Starfleet Academy series,
which is going to be awful,
right? Because it's going to be bumping off of Discovery, and then we've got the Section 31 movie, no longer a series, and that's it. And if I feel like they've lost the plot.
That may be temporary because Paramount Plus has been acquired by Skydance, if I recall correctly.
That sounds right.
And so they're in a transition period where the current regime is, I've been seeing some industry-based videos about this, but they're kind of waiting for the new owners to come in and determine what they're going to be doing with Star Trek in the future.
Because ideally what you want is you have series that butt up against each other so that you keep a Star Trek fan subscribed to your service year round watching new Star Trek. that they kind of did that in last year. We spent almost all of last year just talking about one new series after another, and not a whole lot about classic Trek. And so, whereas now you finish a season, whatever, and then you cancel your subscription for that service and go subscribe to a different one. A lot of people do that now. So I hope Paramount figures this out. We get a lot more Star Trek, and we get another season of Prodigy would be nice. Star Trek Legacy, which is that follow-on series that fans want from Picard season 3, and more of that, because I think even though it's over 50 years old now, there's a lot of life still in Star Trek. I think there's a lot of stories they could tell. I hope that happens. I'll put a link to my article in the show notes if folks are interested in what I had to say, my thoughts on the whole thing. So, final thoughts, Father Jason?
Again, I've enjoyed the series, enjoyed being able to review it here on this podcast, and look forward to this new season of Lower Decks coming up.
And Jimmy?
I've finalized my thoughts.
Okay, very good. So before we head out, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek, including Stephen B., Daniel S., Hillary G., Joel S., and Kevin S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us on Prodigy. What did you think of Ouroboros or Prodigy as a whole? Give us your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com. Visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or watch us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the first 2 episodes of Season 5 of Lower Decks. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, and live long and prosper.
And Father Jason Tyler, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, go boldly.